The earnest money deposit, which is essentially cash that a buyer uses to call dibs on a house, is one of the most important and misunderstood parts of a real estate transaction. The purpose of earnest money is to protect the seller while the buyer performs their due diligence, gets their loan finalized and stuff like that. And if everything goes well, then that money gets transferred towards the buyer's down payment at closing. However, sometimes the earnest money will go to the seller, and today in this video, I'm going to give you 3 instances where the earnest money would go to a seller. Number 1 is when a buyer waives contingencies, and this is becoming more and more popular in today's strong sellers market. For buyers to want to make the offer as best as possible so they can win the bidding on a house. Well, the 2 biggest ones that we see are the financing contingency and the inspection contingency. So in most cases, or by default, a buyer will retain their earnest money if the loan doesn't go through, or if there's some major defects that are found after the home inspection and the sellers do not agree to drop the price or to make these repairs. The earnest money would go to the buyers typically. However, when you waive this contingency, this right, then that would point the earnest money into the direction of the seller. Number 2 is when a buyer ignores the timelines outlined in the purchase agreement. So typically, time is of the essence in a real estate transaction, and a buyer has a certain amount of time to complete their home inspection, make their loan application, things like that. And if those time frames are just simply ignored by the buyer, that gives the sellers ground to take the earnest money and terminate the real estate transaction if everything expires. So as long as the buyer can show to the seller that they are working in earnest to complete these things, we know that sometimes there's a delay just in things that happen that that a buyer can't control, and typically the buyer would be protected there. But if you are purposely or intentionally dragging your feet, then there's a really good case that the earnest money could go to the seller. The third and final scenario for when a seller would get the earnest money is when a buyer gets cold feet and they just decide that they don't want the house anymore. The purchase agreement is a contract that protects both sides, and when a buyer chooses or decides that they just don't want to buy the house, then the seller has protection, and their earnest money is part of that protection. When it comes to real estate, a case of buyer's remorse can be more painful than just a lost deposit. We want you to be very sure of the house that you are bidding on, and there's some strategies that we have just to prepare our buyer clients to be in that position. So if you need help with that, reach out to your favorite Anthony Realtors realtor, and we would love to get started working for you today.